Hi and welcome to Our Small Table. Today we're going to demonstrate my favorite kind of make-ahead meal, which is water bath canning, and we're going to use it to make some applesauce, the recipe for which is on the website. Here's our finished jar. Let's see how we got here. I'm not going to demonstrate the applesauce itself. The recipe is on the website though, and I'll link, but just the canning portion. So the first thing you want to do is inspect your jars for any nicks or cracks or anything. I reuse jars, that's why this one already has an applesauce label on it. I just keep using the same jars. And since this one is fine, then I'm going to put it into the water with the others. And we're just going to sterilize the jar. So I'm going to cover this and bring it up to 180 degrees to sterilize the jars. I'm also going to sterilize the lids, and you can just put them into the same pot as long as you make sure it does not boil. If your jars themselves boil, it's not a big deal. It's just glass. They're not going to be hurt by it. But your lids, the sealant here will start to react if it gets to the boiling heat, and then it won't adhere properly when it comes time to actually use them for canning. So you have to make sure that these do not boil. They stay at a heat of about 180 degrees, a simmer. So I'm going to go ahead and put these into a different pot that has a thermometer attached to it that won't reach to here, and that'll let me know if it gets too hot. An alarm will go off. And so we'll get all these things sterilized. We'll move on to the next step. Okay, everything's sterilized, and I've filled most of the jars already, but we'll go ahead and do the last one using my wide mouth funnel. And I've done this enough times that I know how much to fill the ladle in order to keep it from overfilling the jars. You want to make sure that you have the headspace that's called for in your recipe. And then using a non-metallic spatula, just slide it down the sides to release any air bubbles. Anything that's left in the pan, I'm going to eat myself later. This is the other piece of specialty equipment. This and a jar lifter are the two things that I think are the most helpful for canning. This is magnetic, so I'll use it to pick up the lids. Since they're coming out of simmering water. And then we just take one of our bands, and you don't want to tighten it, just fingertip tight is all you need. Just a little bit, and then you move on to the next one, and then I'll be right back. I know it looked like nothing had changed, but I poured out some of the water in our large pan here because I used that to sterilize the jars. I'm also going to be using it to do the actual canning, and when the jars were empty, more water went into it because it filled the inside of them. Now that they're full, I don't need as much water in there. So I just pick up the jar with the jar lifter and place it in the water. We're going to do that with all of them. And you want to stick them in as soon as you've put the lids on. You don't start counting the time until all of the jars are in and the water is boiling. And remember that if you live at a high altitude, like I do, that you need to check the chart to adjust the length of time for canning. So we'll be back shortly. Once these had finished processing, I turned off the heat, removed them from the heat, and let them cool for several minutes. And now we just remove them to a towel, mainly just to protect my countertop. And you want to let these cool on the counter, separated by an inch or two, depending on how much space you have. I may have to do some adjusting. I have a lot of space with the camera set up. And fortunately, if you heard that right then, the next thing I was going to talk about is there's a little ping as this vacuum sealed itself down. These are still not done yet, but over the next, probably over the next few minutes based on experience, but over the next few hours, they will vacuum seal down. And in 12 to 24 hours, you want to check your jars to see if they've processed properly. And just looking to see if they've gone down or listening for that ping sound is not actually good enough. Once they've been processed and cooled for a while, you want to remove the band, which you can set aside. You aren't going to need it. You don't really want to store the jars with the band on, because over time it can get corroded and become very difficult to remove. But you want to check them by removing the band, setting it aside, looking to see if this is down, and then gently trying to lift the lid with your fingernail. If you can't, then it's done and it can be stored in a cool, dark place until you're ready to eat it. If the lid does come up easily just from trying to lift it, then you can either eat the contents right away, stick them in the fridge and eat them within the next couple of days, or you can reprocess them. And in order to reprocess it, you really do kind of have to start from scratch. You have to take the food, in this case the applesauce, out of the jar, reheat it. You need to re-sterilize the jar, throw away the lid. If it didn't process properly, it cannot be used. Get a new lid, sterilize that, and then process again. And if it doesn't work a second time, or if the problem is clearly due to a crack in the jar or some other problem with the jar itself, discard it and don't try and reprocess, not even the stuff that was inside, because it's likely that some of the boiling water got inside and would have spoiled it, and that gives it access to bacteria. That's all there is to it for water bath canning. It's actually a very simple process once you get started. It's just quite a few steps. So once you've done it a little bit, you get to know what you're doing, and it's really easy to keep going, and then you can probably get the confidence to even try pressure canning if you have the equipment. We'll see you next time at our small table. Thanks.